Number 5. This episode is kind of like The Girl Next Door in that it has a female monster who died who really could have lived. Plus there's an actor from a Joss Whedon TV show. And also, it's kind of like Man's Best Friend with benefits in that the premise had a lot of potential that was wasted, only that fact is much more evident in this case. The Slice Girls was written by Buckner and Ross Lemming and directed by Jerry Wanick, who is a producer and production designer of Supernatural. He's also a bit of a fandom darling for being one of the few people involved in the production of the show who looks at metas written by fans and has actually posted some of them on his Twitter. Yeah, he's cool, but there's not much he could have done to salvage this episode, although I feel compelled to thank him for this scene. The writing is the problem. The answer of who's doing the killings is shown to us before Sam and Dean can figure out what's going on. We have to watch them catch up to the audience, so the mystery is dead almost on arrival. Our monsters for this episode are the Amazons, here made into creatures who sleep with men to reproduce. Their children grow very fast so that there is a standing army to fight against whoever their goddess needs them to fight against. They send the kids out to kill their fathers to complete their training, and I do think it's kind of crap that Amazons, who today are symbols of female empowerment, are made into monsters for Supernatural. Buckner and Ross Lemming and their unfortunate implications. Dean sleeps with an Amazon and she gives birth to their daughter Emma. We see her fighting the mandates of this evil brunette leader lady, but in the end that comes to nothing for her. Emma still goes to Dean with the intention of killing him and then dies, killed by Sam, which was possible revenge for Amy. Also, this episode doesn't have much of a resolution since the Amazons got away to reproduce some more and kill some more dudes. They're supposed to pop up every 2 years. It remains to be seen if they'll ever come around again. Possibly the biggest sin of this episode is that on a show that's all about family, the character Emma, who was the daughter of Dean, gets killed and is never mentioned again. This is something that should have had real emotional weight and consequences for the boys, and it just doesn't. Which brings me to the wasted potential. Emma was brainwashed from a young age to be a warrior. That could have been paralleled easily with Sam and Dean and their upbringing with John. If she had lived, great lessons could have been learned about self-determination and why at some point we have to let go of the expectations of our parents. Also that you have a choice to be who you are, even if you're a monster. Hell, the Amazons could have even been the villains for the 7th season. Anything would have been better than the Leviathans. Seeing Harry Groner does make me happy, but he is a small bright spot in an otherwise bad episode. Number 4. While Sarah Gamble was not a strong showrunner, she is a very good writer. She wrote or co-wrote a bunch of episodes that I watch over and over again. She wrote my second favorite episode of the 2nd season after What Is and What Never Should Be, which is of course House of the Holy. I love everything about this episode. I love how it juxtapositions Sam and Dean's views on faith and religion to make them have these deep, interesting conversations that don't sound forced or stupid. I love how it introduces the idea of angels to the show and the arc words of Mary Winchester about angels watching over Dean, plus the magic fingers joke, which became a running one. It also looks awesome. Every shot looks like a photograph or even a painting. It's all very chiaroscuro. Kim Manners really brought his A game for this one. It's just an exceedingly smart, well-made episode. Yeah, Manners directed another episode written by Gamble that season with much more unfortunate results. Yes, Heart. It's now the 3rd episode in a row on my list that features a monster girl that probably didn't need to die. In the commentaries of Supernatural episodes that feature Gamble, she expresses a fondness for writing tragedy. I suppose she's a bit like Joss Whedon that way, and Heart is a bit Whedon-esque, because it has a couple who falls in love and then one of them dies. Whedon does that a whole lot in his work, but he knows the difference between tragedy and melodrama. When Whedon kills someone, it's tragic because they're a victim of random violence, or they've been backed into a corner with only one deeply sad option left. Melodrama is what happens when there's a solution to the tragedy that is ignored for the sake of manipulative pathos, which is what happens in Heart. I find Madison's death not only stupid, but actively insulting to my intelligence. The non-death answer to Madison changing into a werewolf is in the episode itself. She and the boys stay up on one of the nights that she's supposed to change, but doesn't. The visuals tell us that she has to be asleep to wolf out. Sam even suggests it in the dialogue. If she has to be asleep to change into a werewolf, why doesn't she just stay awake on the week leading up to the full moon? I mean, the answer is just so painfully obvious. If she wants to go to more extreme measures, she could buy a cage or something, plate the bars with silver. If it works for the true blood vampires, I think that it'll work on her. I guess this also upsets me because I like Madison, and I like her relationship with Sam. She went through a lot, being in an abusive relationship and then mugged, and came out of it as a stronger, more self-assured person. Sam calls her impressive, and the audience can easily agree. And the way their relationship is acted at first as being cute awkward is really endearing. Their relationship, as brief as it is built on a real foundation. They could have had something, but she can't live because then Sam would be happy, and we can't have that. The show lives off Sam and Dean's pain, even when the source of that pain makes an annoying lack of sense. Number 3. In a few of his videos, the internet movie reviewer Movie Bob has talked about an issue that he has with stories featuring sympathetic villains. If the villain in question is considered a misfit, deviant, or danger to society when they were originally anything but and made a monster by their oppressors or bullies, how can you not root for them to win? I think there's something to consider in this idea for sure, and I can even empathize with it for this one episode of Supernatural. Mannequin 3: The Reckoning was written by Eric Carmelo and Nicole Schneider and directed by Jano Schwark. Schwark is a guest director, so I won't say much about him, but Carmelo and Snyder are on staff, and they tend to write episodes that are a bit ridiculous, but enjoyable. I think they just want you to have fun watching their work with their silly and occasionally childish sense of humor. But this episode is the single most joyless and mean-spirited episode of the entire series. It's also a big mess. The episode before this, Unforgiven, ends with this great oh shit moment cliffhanger that has Sam collapsing on the floor because he's starting to remember hell, and then this episode happens and that's all just swept under the rug. Sam wakes up, Dean tells him to forget about the things he did as Soulless Sam. Sam kind of agrees, and that's pretty much it. Great payoff for that cliffhanger, guys. This episode takes a pause in the season's A plot and Sam's character arc for a Monster of the Week. But this is even more egregious than The Girl Next Door because the episode's plot is brought to a complete halt so that Dean can go off and deal with the end of his relationship with Lisa. The moments with Lisa and Ben were well written and honest to everyone involved, but they completely disrupt the flow of things. There's also this montage and driving scene that was only put in to pad the episode that flashes back to stuff that just happened. Sweet Lord, this is pointless. The monster is the ghost of poor bullied Rose, who is tricked by a bunch of douches into thinking she had a secret admirer. Then they accidentally kill her and bury her body to cover up the murder. Yeah, I think Rose should have made a wish to Anyanka to kill all of those guys. Hard to sympathize with the victims when I'm totally on the villain's side. The episode thankfully does recognize this, but not only in the end do some of Rose's killers get away, her sister Isabel dies. When Sam burns Rose's remains, her ghost doesn't go away because she gave her kidney to her sister, and the episode solves this problem by killing an innocent woman. It's awful and serves no purpose but to tell us the boys have a shitty life. Wow! What a revelation! Couldn't have figured that out from the other 200 episodes of this show. And did I mention how unfunny this episode is? I don't think a single joke works. It all feels like the definition of trying too hard and the actors phone it in. It's all just such a horrible black pit of despair. Number 2. Truly, this episode needs no introduction. It was at the epicenter of one of the biggest wank storms I have seen upon all my years in fandom. However, the reasons people hated it then and hated it now aren't really shared by me, or rather, I have more reasons than the wanky ones since some of the wank really wasn't triggering for me at all. I'm No Angel was written by Buckner and Ross Lemming and directed by Kevin Hooks. He's a guest director who does his best with the material, but let's face it, the writing is awful. I don't think I can ever emphasize enough how much of this episode is pointless, just hatefully worthless. Buckner and Ross Lemming's terrible habit of showing the audience, but not the characters, important events is at its most maddening here. As the boys and the angels play catch-up with each other, the events of the episode are told to the audience over and over again. For example, we see this scene where Cass goes into a tattoo parlor. In the very next scene, we learn that he warded himself, which you think might be there to explain why Cass was getting a tattoo in the first place, but we're told he's warded 3 more times, as if the writers think we have goldfish attention spans. Other writing issues include how this episode makes no sense when put into context with Captives, where Bartholomew actually wanted Castiel's help. That's sort of completely contradictory to wanting him dead, isn't it? Oh, and why the hell didn't the angels at the beginning just walk into that church shelter and grab Cass? He didn't have any warding then. They could have used their angel finding powers to see where he was. Gosh, I just love it when entire plots are built on flimsy-ass contrivances, don't you? But let's get to the real meat of this thing, because what was at the top of the agenda for this episode was for Castiel to have sex, which he does with this woman April, who I hesitate to even call a love interest. Their romance is completely sparse and empty. Compared to this, Hart looks like a masterclass in how to write one-shot romances. Sam and Madison had reasons in the script to like each other. With Cass and April, it was, here's a sandwich, I instantly trust you, and that was it. Seriously, you think Cass would know better than to trust a complete stranger with his real name and to tell her he killed a guy? Also, who is April? She alluded to having faced hard times in the past, but we have no clue what they were. She's a cipher, and because of this, it's difficult to glean reasons why she would do things like take some guy she met off the street home, or why Cass would be interested in her. Now, to be fair, sometimes people don't get each other's life stories before they hook up. It's the right time, right place, and sex happens. And if April and Cass were written that way, I'd be cool with it. But I'm pretty sure we're supposed to think that this is sweet and that they have some sort of genuine connection, and yeah, I don't buy that crap for a minute. The sex is highly criticized by some because of the accusation of non-con. If the Reaper possessing April did not get her consent to possess her, it means Cass was an unwitting participant in rape. You can rest easy though, because he wasn't. We're told the real April agreed to possession. It's also hinted at that April's soul is no longer in her body. Yeah, Reaper April lied about who she was before she and Cass slept together, but I don't take issue with this either. Even if you want to call it bad consent, April is a villain. She also stabs Cass to death. The episode in no way condones what she did, so I can't get worked up over it like hundreds of people did. It pisses me off way more that all of this dialogue that happens during the torturing is just spewing information we already know. It's also pointless because April dies, meaning none of it gets back to Bartholomew or anyone else. So I say if you're going to hate it for non-wank reasons. Before we get to my number 1, I'm going to share some thoughts about some lesser liked episodes and runners-up for the list. Guys, I tried, but I don't hate Rock and Hard Place. The actress who plays Bonnie, or Vesta, was really excellent. She's funny, and she has the church lady thing down pat, and she's surprisingly scary when she's revealed to be the monster. I think the victims in the whole thing was a great idea. It's all very unsettling and scary in a humans can be monsters too kind of way, and Jodie is awesome, of course. Yeah, Dean is kind of forward with Susie, but I think that might come from misunderstanding his character versus mischaracterization. That Jenny Klein, the writer of this episode, thinks that Dean's macho swagger is a genuine part of who he is versus a mask he wears. But it still wasn't out of character for Dean to want casual sex, nor for him to get it. And Susie was obviously into it too, so I just don't get the wank over two consenting adults having sex. It might be out of character for Dean to ignore Sam's call, though, in favor of the sex, since Dean knows ignoring calls during hunts gets you killed, but your mileage may vary on that one. I think it's questionable writing versus all out bad. And unlike some, I don't think Klein is the devil. Mostly her work is mediocre, but it does rise above occasionally. I thought about putting Bloodlines on the list because it is a truly terrible episode, but I see it as being more of a failed pilot of another show than an episode of Supernatural. Its existence is almost worth it for this one joke, though.
Sounds good, Buffy.
Ha! Someone on the writing staff noticed that Dean is basically Buffy Summers with bad parts.
All those angels, all those demons, all those sons of bitches, they just don't get it, do they, Sammy?
No, they don't, Dean.
See, Brady, we're the ones you should be afraid of.
I always find a way. I'm the thing that monsters have nightmares about. And right now, you and me are gonna show them why.
Got your lunch? Books? Butterfly knife?
Yeah, dude. Do you have everything? Books, lunch, steaks, checked rice.
That made my week. I like Bitten. I don't object to episodes where the boys are not the main focus, and it's cool to see an episode from the perspective of who they're hunting. It breathed new life into Supernatural, and showed us that the series is now a slightly different entity under Carver than it was when Kripke and Gamble were running things. Brian became a monster before he got bit by a werewolf because he let his jealousy and desire for Kate consume him. A person is made a monster because of their choices, not because of what they are. This theme is clearly a favorite of Carver's, as can be seen in both Supernatural and his work on the US Being Human. A lot of people seem to not like Chris Angel is a douchebag, but I kinda love it. I love when the show goes to morally ambiguous places. We don't really feel sorry for the victims because they were assholes, and the supposed bad guy did what he did because he wanted his best friend to be happy. It also connects to the boys in an emotionally honest way, and I understand why Sam would think drinking demon blood again is a good idea. I suppose a morally ambiguous antagonist is also why I'm such a big, unapologetic fan of The Curious Case of Dean Winchester. I guess I have a weakness for snarky, affably evil villains. Oh well. Also, this ending always gets me. Number 1. One of Supernatural's trademarks is its great fondness for breaking the fourth wall. The creative team loves to get meta, and they've gotten meta about a fair few things. Twilight, Grey's Anatomy, old monster movies, Hollywood executives.
Mitchie, you know what I'm saying. You're the master of that stuff. Brad, this is a horror movie. Yeah, who says horror has to be dark? It's sort of depressing.
Ghost hunting shows, but Supernatural's fourth wall breaking is at its best when it turns its sharp and witty lens back in on itself, and also towards its audience.
Oh my god, that was one of my favorite ones because Dean was so strong and sad and brave, and Sam. I mean, the best parts are when they cry. You know, like in Heart. When Sam had to kill Madison, the first woman since Jessica he really loved. And in Home, when Dean had to call John and ask him for help. Gosh. If only real men were so open and in touch with their feelings.
Real men?
I mean, no offense. How often do you cry like that?
However, this can be tricky. Done right, you can give your audience a big hug and thank you for loving your show. I still think this one speech is kind of beautiful, by the way. Seriously, it almost makes me teary. Done wrong, it's like giving your audience a punch in the face. Season 7, Time for a Wedding, kind of baffles me, honestly. Like, seriously, what the fuck were they thinking? The writers are Andrew Dabb and Daniel Laughlin. They both worked on the show for years and wrote many good and even great episodes. Laughlin isn't on staff anymore, but Dabb is, and he seems to have a great fondness for the epic sweep of a story. There are big moments in many of his episodes, but they're always grounded in the visceral, emotional reality of the characters. It's damn near operatic some of the time. and I'm just going to assume he and Laughlin were asleep when they wrote this crap. Tim Andrew directed. He's a guest director, and I'm not very familiar with his other work. For the record, I don't hate Becky, but I understand the issues that people have with her. She's an audience avatar, meaning she's a stereotype of the audience, or rather how the creative team sees the audience. And I can't say she's a completely dishonest representation. I've certainly known people like her, and even had my Becky moments 10 or more years ago, but there's honestly not much to her, besides her frankly creepy obsession with Sam. And in this episode, we blow straight past the line of creepy into full-on rapey territory. She drugs Sam with a love potion so that he'll marry her, and when he gets his agency back, she kidnaps him and ties him to a bed. There are other problems with this episode, and I'll get to them, but I'll never stop being amazed that someone thought it was a good idea to turn an audience avatar into a Stephenie Meyer protagonist for cheap laughs. Yeah, this does kind of offend me. Like, me, personally. Which is kind of hard to do. I mean, in case it's escaped your notice, I don't really have triggers. It really doesn't make sense for the demons to collect early. Why would anyone ever sell their soul if they didn't then have time to enjoy whatever it was they sold their soul for? That's why they get 10 years. Yes, Crowley does come in with his awesomeness and acknowledge that this makes no sense, but it doesn't mean that our time wasn't just wasted by watching a short-sighted demon try and up his soul quota and failing miserably. There's also the ending, where the show does recognize the sad fact that Dean's primary mode is still look out for Sammy, even though Sam is an adult now. And I'm pretty sure the powers at the time intended to do nothing about this, but I already talked about Sam and Dean's completely stunted development in the 7th season. Finally, as much as I love Garth, and I do, he's kind of annoying here because he only disrupts the flow of the case instead of actually helping. I'm so glad that Glass got his hands on him and made him into a real hunter, albeit an unconventional one. So that's it. That's my list. And I encourage you to make one of your own. If you like it, please share it around. Sayonara and auf Wiedersehen.
John and Mary, husband and wife, bringing